Hello, everyone, and welcome to the virtual launch of the book Notes on Creation, a compilation of insightful interviews about the nuances of the creative process in contemporary performing arts. The book has been compiled by Oliver Pinchbeck and Declan Me, artists and co-founders of Katapult. Katapult is a prominent cultural fixture in the performing arts scene here in Berlin. For 5 years now, it has been serving artists from various disciplines, including dance, contemporary circus, and theatre. My name is Farhad Mirza. I'm a journalist, a musician, and I work at Katapult in various capacities. I will be your host today. Over the course of this event, you will be hearing from Oli and Declan, as well as many artists from various disciplines, who will be talking about the relevance and significance of this book, as well as providing insights about the trials and tribulations of the creative process in general. We hope you will enjoy the show. We begin first with Oli and Declan, who will be talking about the idea behind the book and the process of putting it together.
Welcome, Oli and Declan. Can you start by telling me a bit about the idea behind the book?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of came out of some dinner table conversation, actually, that took place over quite a few years, kind of alongside all of the other projects we were running. That basically the scene that we were in suffers from a bit of a lack of written material in general. I mean, I don't know how it is for everybody else. I actually learned to juggle and kind of started my path through all the things that I do now from a book. And at the time, I remember thinking it was just a bit of a shame that the book itself was limited to just technical things. It was just a list of tricks, one after the other, basically, that you could learn. And I kind of always felt like that was a lack for me throughout my journey through performing, of having access to, should we say, sort of more complex layers of thinking and more complex ways of looking at artistic creation and production, such as you tend to get through a more formal education, like going to a circus school or going to regular education. And then when we started Katapult, it was part of our mission to expose people who wouldn't normally have access to that kind of thinking to teachers who would normally teach in the higher level institutions. Effectively making it possible to kind of cross the barriers between formal education and professional work, even without having necessarily attended schools. So the idea with this book was to try and overcome this issue a little bit. Theoretically, you could just pick it up and flick to a random part of it, read some interesting thoughts from some interesting people, and that might give you the little nudge that starts your day's work.
So the idea of the book was to create a manuscript that would be useful to an artist at every stage of the process, from first beginnings and researching, improvisation, to create more through to creating a longer show. We cover topics like directing, also later on stuff like business, how to sell your show, how to organize yourself. And to achieve this, we thought that the best way would be to collect a lot of thoughts on these topics from a wide range of current practitioners of the art form, be they teachers, performers, directors.
And how was the process of putting the books together?
So the first step was to come up with the questions that we wanted to ask people. And we spent a good month or two sitting around musing on what would be the right things to be asking people. And we tried to be really quite wide-ranging, everything from asking people to describe their own creative processes to asking people how music was relevant for their work, or did they have any advice for directors? What advice might they have for their own younger self? Potentially tips and tricks that might be useful for other people earlier in their journeys or about to start working now. Everything from what are the most important points in a contract to what should I know about going on my first tour.
So we started out sending these questionnaires to a select group of the contributors. And we got, I think it was 5 people originally. We got their answers back. We decided to make some tweaks to the questionnaire, which was an ongoing process, it turned out, during the whole thing, and to optimize the answers we were getting towards certain topics, or even just asking questions in a different way to help steer their thoughts. Or if we felt like we had loads of answers on a specific topic, we might also get rid of it.
So then once we'd sent out as many questionnaires as we could handle, we waited for the responses to come back and gathered together the answers from, in total, 27, should we say, contemporary artists of the scene, with very varied backgrounds, some younger, some older, some earlier in their careers, some later in their careers. The two are not necessarily the same. Performers, directors, teachers, producers, like really trying to approach the questions from very different sides and see how many different opinions we could get. And for me, one of the most interesting things, I think, is that in general, all the things we're talking about are somehow to do with making art. So there's very rarely a situation where there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And quite regularly throughout the responses, you see people with very strong opinions and quite often completely opposing opinions to somebody else who is also a successful working professional artist. So clearly different things work for different people. And it's great to have such a wide range of things to look at and see, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about trying it that way. Maybe I could look at that. And, I've been told always that it should be this way. And I can see that loads of people think it should be that way, but it never seems to work for me. Oh, and here's another answer from somebody else that says that thing never worked for me. I always tried it like this. And I felt it's the research work for us, I think, has really given a lot of interesting insight and perspective into the working minds of a lot of people around us, which is extremely interesting in itself. And hopefully what we've managed to condense into what we can actually publish is going to be useful for a lot of people in the scene around us.
At the beginning, the process wasn't set. So it was really interesting as we got more answers in and more material in from the contributors, we started to imagine how we could put it together in different ways. We had a lot of different ideas about how to do that. And it was an interesting kind of artistic process and journey for us to go through and not know exactly where we were going, but confident that we were going in a good way and that we had a lot of good material and we just needed to figure out a good way to optimize that in the final format. And we think that we've landed on a good way to make it very usable and like a living book, like not something that you read once, but something that you pick up and can flick to a certain part to consult on a certain topic.
Cool, great. Thank you so much, Oli and Declan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. We really hope you enjoy. And we just want to say one final thank you very much to FondsDaku for the opportunity to do this.
And a big thanks to all our contributors, of course.
Next up, we have Matthias Romain, whom I interviewed remotely with my colleague, Citra Mallet.
Welcome, Matthias, to the interview. Great having you. We would like to start with you introducing yourself, telling us a bit about who you are and what you do.
My name is Matthias and I'm a contemporary weirdo. That's what you wanted to hear? Also, I juggle and also I'm a clown. It says I'm an expressive juggler, a depressing clown, and a contemporary weirdo.
Yeah. How did you come to be a contemporary weirdo?
For me, this is the question, is like, how did I come to be a juggler and a clown, and why did I put this weirdo thing behind? I think for me, I decided to be a weirdo because this gives me even more freedom than being a clown. Like I say, I'm a juggler, I'm a clown. This all is like, okay, he's doing this and that, but I just want to do what I want to do. So I decided to put this because I think this allows me to do anything. Not like kill someone, but you know what I mean. Like on stage, right? There's stuff on stage that I do, which then people might say, "Ah, yeah, this is juggling," and then they say like, "Ah, yeah, that's a clown act." But then there's these other acts that are not juggling or clowning on first sight, and I still want to do them. And I think with this description, I'm allowed to do it.
So the term contemporary weirdo sort of helps you escape the perception of, or the conventional perception of what a juggler does or what a clown does and so on. Is that right? Or
yeah, in a way, I think. Yeah.
I've seen you train on many occasions. I've had the pleasure, and I've seen a lot of other people train. And a lot of other people, they try a trick, maybe 10 times, they don't get it right. They move on to a different one. They get bored of constantly failing at a trick. You are hard-headed in the way that I've seen you try something 300 times till you get it right. And then also, a lot of your shows, you describe that as an art of failure. So I'm very curious about what's your relationship to failure when you encounter it both in practice and how you manage to somehow make that a part of your performance as well.
Yeah, I do. The art of failure, no? That's, in my eyes, what clown is about, no? I think especially a juggler, and not just me, but most of the jugglers in their daily habits and in their daily training, they have a lot more to deal with failure than with success. I think, no? Because it's a long way to get things straight. This is just the peak of the iceberg, is the success. And many, many people on stage only talk about success. No, what you see is just the peak of the iceberg, and not all the struggleful way of how they got there. No, in a way. And for me, this bigger part, this is underneath the water, the bigger part of the iceberg, is actually the more interesting thing, because I think not only jugglers, but in general, everyone in their lives deal more with failure than with success. I think in general, people don't consider themselves or their lives as totally successful. Everyone have their own struggle, no? I don't know about you, but this is, the longer you talk to people, everyone is struggling with something. And that's why when I talk on stage about failure, or when what I do puts the failure in the center of what's happening, I think with my art, I am closer to the people than when I only show what I can do.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think your shows often have this very human quality. And it's one of those shows where you see people laughing and crying, etc. There's a lot of sentimentality to it. What was the appeal of the sad clown to you? Was that the appeal that made you sort of gravitate towards that persona as a creative expression?
No, that's just because sometimes I have to perform hungover, and this is just no. The sad clown. I don't know. It's it's difficult to explain why you would choose, for some reasons, why you would make happy music or sad music, or why you would choose to be a sad clown or a happy juggler or anything. For me, in general, like, for example, the moments, for example, when we talk about music, yeah? Of course, it's nice to listen to music when you're happy, but the most important moments when you need music and when music can help you out of something is when you're not happy. And for me, it helps when the music is also not happy. Because that makes me feel less alone. Right? I feel there's someone else who's also not happy. And this makes me happier, because I feel in company and understood. And that's why I think it's necessary to have sad clowns to help. Not, I don't know. I don't think I'm so. Forget about it. It's a bit over the top to say something, but I would to say something like that.
Like what?
That I help people see something from a more humorous point of view. I don't know. It's a bit from.
I don't think it is. I think that's totally true.
Yeah.
And I think that's why so many people, is my impression, knowing you as a performer, having seen your shows, I think there is, like the bit you talked about before as well, showing all the sides of your performance, not only the perfect bam tricks, like it becomes more relatable for us as audience members.
I agree with that too, because I think
Thank you.
if you just think about I think if you just think about how we live our lives, so much of it is a performance of happiness. Like, we hide the fact that our life is actually defined by constant struggles and failures. And we just sort of present ourselves as people who constantly overcome.
Yeah.
So I think, and it makes the struggle lonely, because we only talk about the successes, as you said. So to do a performance of failure is kind of like refreshing and also almost emancipating emotionally, because you can just sort of go, it's okay, I'm in a safe place. And I don't have to pretend. I don't have to constantly look for a way to perform happiness in my life. Yeah.
If you are to like figure out what you are worth as an artist, and here I'm thinking about the process of like putting a price on your own show. I think that's something a lot of young and new artists struggle with, and as an artist myself, I also feel like it's a topic that's not talked about that often.
It's true. It's funny that you wanna. I don't know if you read my answers on the questionnaire. I was also surprised that this topic got me in a way so emotionally, and I kind of made a strong statement for talking about money, because I think it is important.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So, can you tell us a bit about how you would go around that, putting a price on your own shows, or have you done that in the past?
Of course, I have put prices on my own show. First of all, I want to make that statement again. I think artists should talk with other artists about money. They should, even if they have friends who are bookers or something, talk with bookers about money. And I think it's necessary, because this is it's a complicated story. No, it's not like how to give value on art is a very, like, financial value is a very delicate topic, and of course there's reasons why some people are more expensive than others, and of course if you talk about them, about those reasons, you might find out are those good reasons or not, right? For example, if it's your first time to work in a variety show, right? Maybe you don't get as much money as someone who's been in the business for 50 years, right? And still having a successful show. And it's totally okay like that, no? If you find out that all your colleagues who have the same quality of work than you in the show get more money than you, the only reason why you didn't get as much money as them is that you didn't know a proper price for your act. And if you talk about money, this will be the last time that you hopefully that you don't get enough money for what you do, because next time that only reason why you got less money, which was I didn't know how much I could ask, will not exist anymore, no? Because now you know. The thing is, in that moment, like, don't be angry that, and don't try to like, but I want more money now for my work. No, the contract is done. You didn't know what to ask for, and that is a proper reason to get less, right? But just try to find out for next time, and don't be angry. Just accept, okay, I didn't know. Next time I know, right? This is my way of thinking this, no?
But it also has a lot to do with confidence that you feel as an artist in demanding a certain price, right? So a lot of times people have self-doubts, they have or they have a fear that nobody will show up if I ask for a higher price, etc. So it seems like a very delicate dance of trying to figure out which price is right for your audience and for where you are in your career. So how do you go about that?
Yeah. And also it is, I don't think that you necessarily need a fixed price for what you offer. I think I wrote this also, no? I think it very much depends in terms of art, who you sell to. Yeah. Because there is other reasons than money to do a show. For example, if you want to try out something new, you don't need to ask money. You can try out something new for free, but then you know why you don't ask money for it. Or if it's that really, really fancy festival where you've heard that they have the best catering in the world and you just pass the very, very best time in the world, but they don't have a big budget, then of course you're allowed to sell your show for cheaper. So money is not the only reason to work, and you just need to find out, do I do this job to get a lot of money, or are there also other reasons? And if they don't have the money to pay your regular price, which now you hear that I do have kind of a regular price that I can vary. I can say like, for these and these and these reasons, I can make it cheaper. But for other reasons, I allow myself to make it more expensive. Like to think like, oh, I don't really want to do this job for my regular price, because there is reasons why I think it's worth more in this context.
Well, that's very interesting how you go about it.
I think it's so valuable information, and something like you say as well, that all artists could just benefit for, be more open about with each other and talk about, for sure. Yes, yeah. Thank you so much, Matthias. It's been really interesting.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Peter Lilly, whom I interviewed remotely with my colleague, Citra Millet.
My name is Peter Lilly. I am a theatre maker, performer, director, creative mentor. I write for shows. I think that's everything. Yeah, theatre maker, teacher, workshop leader.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. So, we were going through your contributions to this book that Oli and Dec have compiled. And a lot about it is about demystifying the creative process. And of course, one of the most mystical things about the creative process is, how does one start? How does one put themselves in a frame of mind where creative inspiration flows? Because you talk about rituals, and I think a lot of artists sort of have rituals in order to get them started. And I was interested in that relationship of sort of like creating rituals for yourself and how that feeds into the creative process.
Well, a lot of the time I have ignored, those rituals. They're the kind of recourse of, how can I sit down and do this? Let's make it special. Let's carve a space for it. It's also difficult for me to separate creativity from daily life, because everything you're doing, I'm reading a book or listening to an audiobook and I'll be taking notes. So I'm journaling in my book, and it's either writing out household tasks I need to do or things that I need to process running through. So it's the artist's job to process their stuff, which is coming at you through the world. So there's a lot of times when I'm just like mooching around and having another cup of tea and things like that, or you do like, yes, I'll do a timed writing, and then you stop and you do a load of laundry, so there's a lot of the mundane linked into it. But having done Julia Cameron, the Artist's Way. It's a book on creativity. It's a kind of course inside a book. And a good number of years back now, there was a fellow artist, and she was suddenly doing all sorts of things, on her Facebook feed. I'm saying, and I said, "What? You're great. You're doing great things." And she said, "Yes." She said, "The Artist's Way. I've been doing the Artist's Way." And I went to my bookshelf, where I blew the dust off it because I'd had it for 10 years. And I looked at it when I bought it, and I thought, oh yeah, I do that. But when you do this book, she gets to a certain place where she says, now not everyone likes the word prayer, but you end up writing your artist's prayer. So you make a kind of statement to what you believe in. And I always like Grayson Perry, he says, hold your beliefs lightly, but do create your own magic, have your own totems, just things like it's your workspace, it's a place of creativity. So what, anything that's calming you, or at one point I went to a woman who'd done eagle's wing shamanism, and she had different colors. You know how they have the medicine wheel, and there's a yellow and a black and a white and a red, the cardinal points, and she had semi-precious stones in each of those sectors of her room. Why not? We make sure that our Wi-Fi is working, that our laptop is up to scratch. So why not make this kind of space, this sense of supporting yourself, this sense of, I'm doing this because I feel something coming up from inside me. And even though there's all the doubts about who am I to speak, particularly nowadays when we're really concerned who has the right to speak, whose voice needs to be heard nowadays. But all you can come back to is, I'm here. So maybe, and anyway, any human being has the right of self-expression. So just serving that is the prime thing, I think, for me at this moment in time.
So what is for you a good day, and what is for you a bad day creatively? What happens when these rituals or these sort of spaces that we create sort of break down and don't deliver the promise?
Either you need to go higher, call in an outside eye, or abandon the piece, and learn, keep it as a question. Why? Oh my heavens, we couldn't move forward with it. We couldn't solve it or fix it. Since then, I came across a wonderful tool. I think I mentioned it with columns, where you kind of write all the elements of your piece, and you go, so here's each scene. Is this serving the character? Is it serving the plot? Is it serving the theme? What aspect? Is it a visual bit? Is it a is it moving an argument forward? Is it funny? And you look, and it's a really good way of seeing if you're unnecessarily duplicating something, or if you've kind of weirdly got two themes going on. So to refine and make the choices. So it's kind of when that's the other end, isn't it? There's the kind of how do you feel the feed the creative impulse, but then the other thing is then when do you start getting really ruthless and very clear-sighted?
So one of the questions we asked you in the book as well was what you define as a successful artist. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that a bit more, because in the book you answered to that question. You said someone who enjoys their creativity and craft and who honors and respects it. And I think that was such a nice answer, especially, I don't know, for me to read as a, like, I still consider myself as a very fresh new artist. And I thought it was a really, really nice answer you gave to that. So can you say a bit more about why you answered it like that?
Yes. There've been times, just to go back to the past, and then I'll come back to the standpoint from which I wrote that, that there was a time when I was going, oh God, how do you be successful? Oh my heavens. And I wanted to make a show about it. And a director, a beautiful man called Rex Doyle, and he said, oh, well, the Shakespeare, go to Macbeth, go to Lady Macbeth. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I could do a thing on Lady Macbeth. And then, it probably needs to be a two-hander, and then it turned into a writing project as opposed to, I think I even put in an application for a two-hander, and then that didn't get taken up at that point in time. So someone suggested that, apply to the writing department of the, I don't know what you call it, of the Arts Council. And I wrote a play. So this is many, many years ago. So you can try to learn to use your dissatisfactions and express them in the form of art. Because by the time you've turned them into even a draft towards something, even if it doesn't come out, you're working something out. When you're in process, either you're dancing it out, or you're writing it out, or you're painting it out, or you're drawing it out, and it just sets the wheels in motion. That so that was like on the topic of what's successful or not. I read some things, and I can't quite remember where, that so even if someone said something before, your voice might be the one that resonates with someone else. So to give the example of a Shakespearean play, there can be 25. Imagine a festival where there's 25 productions of The Tempest, and that your one might speak to someone or some 10 or whatever people. So there's always a place for a voice to be heard.
Just wanted to ask you, because you said that a successful artist is somebody who honors their art. Can you expand on what exactly do you mean by honor? Like what is it to honor one's art?
I think I wrote that because it's not like if you're honoring like your physical craft or honoring your writing craft, then you're not saying, once again, you're not saying I need to be good enough, I need to have talent. You just honor it. Again, it's like showing up at the page and giving it the space that it deserves. I guess it's a funny point in time, because actually what I'm doing right now is destroying journals from. I'm like, I don't know if you know Anais Nin, and there's this the famous journalist from, when was she writing, in the 50s, and there's a photo of her in her in this bank vault that had all her journals, and they were like higher than her. She's like this little woman standing there. So I've got that. I've got a whole load of them that I'm going to get rid of. But I've got a smaller box that's got the journals of what seems to be the last at least 6 years. And there comes a time when you just have to go, oh, come on, you know. So it's not it's not written in stone. It's not an epitaph. It's a magic slate. So sometimes honoring is the doing, but it's not like revering in a static way.
So having answered these questions in the questionnaires, that's all in the book as well. How do you think that this book is relevant for artists to read?
I think, not talking about my bit, but I think it's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant idea that Oli and Declan and whoever else was involved had. And because we're always hungry, I have been for years hungry. I was going, you know, devising, books on devising. And this sort of, because of Oli, I ordered a book, haven't read it yet, that there was the Frantic Assembly book, that it described their process. And then there are other books like the Julia Cameron, but it's kind of largely a writing-based process, but it will nourish, I think, pretty much anyone. That I was thinking this morning, I looked at that question, I thought it's such a lovely question. I think it's going to be a brilliant resource because it'll show huge variety. There'll be different chapters that will, and somehow reading between the gaps is going to be so valuable to people. You read the whole book and you'll go, each person will either have new questions or link together the different perspectives and advice in the different books in their own ways. And it'll be non-prescriptive, which I think is also a plus. A real tool, hopefully with real, because you do want some exercises, don't you? You do want, this is a technique. I think I added some of those at the end, didn't I? Things that people might do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time and your experiences. It's been very interesting to listen to you. And I hope we'll have another opportunity to continue the discussion. And thank you so much for your contribution to this book.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to be asked, and I can't wait to read the book.
Yes, it's gonna be great.
Lovely talking with you guys this morning. Really nice. Yeah.
Next up, we have Elizabeth Clark-Hasters. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Okay. My name's Elizabeth Clark-Hasters. I have been a dancer and an actress and a dance teacher and an acting teacher and a choreographer and a theater director and now I am working as a consultant or an advisor in anti-discrimination, especially, hopefully, anti-discrimination in the arts.
Interesting. Can you start by talking about that work and also your personal experiences? Did you face any discrimination when you were starting out as an artist, and do you face any discrimination still today after everything that you've achieved?
Sure. Because this kind of thing, like discrimination, is inside of the society and inside of everybody. And especially in the arts, there's a sort of inner competition because you really are identifying with what you do, And so your work is also who you are. So the kind of competition that it doesn't always, but that can arise is I need to be better than another person. So it's like, it's really easy for people in the arts to discriminate. It's also really easy for people in the arts to think, well, I'm an artist, I have thoughts that are universal, so of course I don't discriminate, So that's part of the work that I do is getting people to the point where they can realize that this very human thing is also a thing that they do. And it can be put aside. That's a great part of what I do. And did I face discrimination? Sure. In the 60s and 70s, trying to be a ballet dancer, if you're Black, you face discrimination.
How did you cope with it, and how has the way discrimination manifests itself changed from when you were younger to now? Is it still the same kind of discrimination, or is it a different kind of discrimination now?
That's very interesting.
And perhaps a bit more subtle in the art world, because as you said, a lot of people believe they're above it. So
yeah.
They don't know they're doing it.
I don't know if the way I am, the things that happen that I recognize as this is discriminatory behavior, I don't know if that's changed so much, because, human beings have a certain repertoire, but my perception of them has changed. I can see where people are caught up in a system that they've learned. I can see where people are not actually making their own choices. A lot of people in this work, in anti-discrimination work, really try to differentiate between individual and systemic. And this is like really hard to communicate to other people. So my perception of when I'm being discriminated against has both become sharper. I'm more clear about that. But also I think, they don't really know what they're doing. And how I cope with it, sometimes I don't cope with it. Sometimes I'm hurt and confused and angry and so on. But I give it place. I give it space. I give those emotions space. And after having given them space, I realize, what happens to me is just like my feeling. What other people are doing, we can find platforms to raise awareness of that. And the other thing is, when I was growing up, I just thought, I don't care. I don't care what they think. I just do what I do.
If you could speak to your younger self, with the benefit of hindsight, what advice would you offer to your younger self about your upcoming artistic journey?
I would definitely say stay true to what you want and who you are. People are always going to try to make you be something that they want you to be and they want to see in you. That's their projection. That's not who you are. Stay true to who you are, even if it seems like nobody wants to know about that. Because not being true to yourself as an artist, at some point you stagnate, you can't move, you become trite and trivial. This I would definitely say to my younger self. I would also say to my younger self, make friends. Make good friends. People you can trust, people you can laugh with, people who don't expect things of you. So that's also really important. And the third thing I would say is learn how to take care of yourself, set boundaries, and treasure yourself, treasure your life.
Can you comment a bit more on the kind of friendships one can hope for in an industry that is so competitive? And as you said, again, everyone, the sense of what they do, their act, is part of who they are. So if the act has to be better than everybody else's, they have to be better than everybody else. In that sort of competitive environment, what hope do we have for solid friendships?
Well, I think you have to start by being the kind of person that you want to be around. Then you tend to attract those people. And also being really aware of your own intuitions with people. If you feel good, then generally those are good people for you to be around. They nurture you, they support you. They also tell you when you're being silly. If you feel good around someone, generally it's a good person for you to be around. So what I can hope for friendships is people who are willing to be supportive. When somebody's willing to be supportive, then you can support them on the other side, and then you can become friends. And you gotta have people that you can laugh with.
Definitely, yeah. You also mentioned that one of the things you would tell your younger self would be true to who you are. How does one do that? Because there's this whole element of where do I begin and when do I become other people and other influences that I incorporate into my daily life, people I listen to, etc. So that question of authenticity can be troubling. How does one find out if their actions are authentic?
Well, a lot wiser people than me have been contemplating and dealing with this question for thousands of years. I think that's just the question of human being, of being a human. How can I be true to myself? And it's a journey. It's a journey.
How do you know you're being true to yourself? Is it a matter of trusting your intuitions? Is it a matter of just knowing that your passion pulls you in one direction and maybe other concerns push you in another, and trying to hold on to that thing that you really want to do? How do you know you're being yourself?
I think it's a question of divesting. Yeah. It's not an accumulation of understanding or an accumulation of knowledge. It's like letting things drop away. I don't need that. This is not serving me. I don't feel like this anymore. Because what's left when you drop away things, what's left is actually the essence of who you are. There's so many philosophies that talk about that, and there's so many things where you say this is a mystery of human life. And artistic work is also a divesting. Yeah, you take away objections, you take away thoughts and prejudices, and you get closer and closer and closer to the work. The work is there, and you just have to get out of the way and let it be. So self and work become more and more essential. Yeah, that's how you know, when you feel like, okay, I have nothing left. What's left is the self.
It's very interesting. You work with some of the greats, Pina Bausch, Stockhausen, as you mentioned. What was it like getting to that point? Did it meet your expectations, or was there an element of disillusionment of what it's actually like to be there? To work towards something and get to it, and then say, well, this is it.
Yeah, I had a really strong experience with that. Because when I was a little girl and just starting out with my ballet classes and thinking, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a ballet dancer, and thinking about, I'm going to go to Europe and I'm going to tour the world and I'm going to dance in front of crowned heads, and one day I'm going to be standing in my dressing room in a long white coat and someone will have anonymously sent me roses to my dressing room, and when I go out, people will be asking for my autograph. And this was like, my childhood dream of what it was going to be like. And there came a day when those things actually really happened. And I went through with it and signed the autographs and so on. I went home and I was 19 and I thought, okay, now what?
And was that a blessing or a curse, that moment?
Actually, it was a blessing because it freed me from having to try to reach those things. They were all done. So I was totally free to look for what's important. Yeah, follow my intuition. What is important to me? And at the time I was in Brussels working with Beau, and Beau was he's a very philosophical person. So it was really good for me to be in front of this now what in the environment of an artist who was like on the avant-garde of what ballet was at that time, and who was a philosopher, So, it was actually really a blessing.
Have you ever followed any bad advice that, again, in hindsight, you just wish, I shouldn't have done that?
Sure. Sure. Starting with, why don't you wear your hair this way? There's little tiny bad advice, and one follows that and realizes fairly quickly that, well, that was bad advice. But big bad advice. One thing was that I should try to make art that would be for the market. Try to understand what the market wants. There was a lot of talk about the market, which I realized later, this is also a made-up thing. It's an illusion. But at the time, we were all impressionable young people and thinking, oh yeah, I have to find out what the market wants and try to create for that. This does not work. First of all, the market, there isn't any. Second of all, what the market wants, you can't know that. You can't even find it out. So this means you're trying to do something that can't be done. And all that time, you're getting farther and farther and farther away from the reason that you make art to begin with. So that was some bad advice that I followed for a while until I realized that it just doesn't lead anywhere. And then I stopped.
That's interesting, because unless you create it, how would you know? How would you know the worth of an idea until you've acted upon it, right? So a market may respond very positively to something that you've created, but if you're just trying to create what the market wants, then you're copying the last thing that was successful. So you're just reproducing something that worked and hoping that it will work again, and often it doesn't because people have moved on.
Yeah.
What piece of advice would you, again, in hindsight, say that was good advice, but I didn't take it, I didn't understand it at the time? And why do you think it was that it happens often that, people give us advice, and it can be good advice, and for whatever reasons we decide we're better than this, we're above this advice, we don't need to listen to it, and then it seems like, I should have listened to that. So has that ever happened with you?
Yes. In one place, one very specific place, people telling me, don't forget to save up for when you get old. I don't know. I know a lot of artists who think they're not going to get old. We're going to live forever, and we exist from love and light, which works for a while. But when you're old and your bones hurt and people are not really interested in what you do, and you can't create because things have moved on, and you're standing there with nothing, this is a piece of advice that I did not listen to, and I really should have.
It's a lot of people either aim to live forever or die young. And so what would you say is the folly of a belief like that, and how to prepare for something that you really don't see coming yet? Like how can we make ourselves aware of those things that don't seem urgent to us right now?
By realizing that not everyone who came before you was a fool. That experience has a value. I thought that people who were telling me that, I thought, what do they know? Yeah, but I think it's a certain kind of humility and an appreciation of the experiences of other people. You don't have to repeat them. You can hear them, take them, and go on your own way, but realize that when 5, 10, 15 people tell you the same thing, there might be something to it.
Can you say a little bit more about growing older as an artist? You mentioned, trends move on. There are physical impediments, maybe the bones hurt, etc. Maybe you didn't save up as much as you should have. How do you cope with that? Because we don't talk about it much in the industry, what it is, what happens to older artists.
If you are very fortunate, you have taken all those lessons about art and humanity to heart. If you're very fortunate, then you see things like aching bones, reduced circumstances as a part of your ultimate work of art. If you can go through those circumstances, because they're not really pleasant for anybody, if you can go through them and still feel the curiosity and feel the sense of wonder, hey, my body doesn't work anymore like it used to, then you're finishing off your big work of art. Yeah, I think that's how I would try to deal with this.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. Yeah. And finally, we will be hearing from a mix of artists from the Katapult community. Hi, Beau. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Farad.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. My name is Beau. I am a French juggler and circus artist. And I live here in Berlin, and I spend most of my time here in this amazing space that is Katapult.
No, thank you. It's good to have you here. Beau, you have a Patreon page, and you mainly fund yourself. You mainly sustain yourself through that. The impulse that a lot of artists have when they start out is to go straight into performance, and they think of that as their main stream of income. But there are other alternatives available. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, so yeah, indeed, my main source of income is through this platform that is Patreon, and also teaching online classes, whether it is on Patreon or other means on internet. That comes from the fact that I started juggling very young, and very young I had this need of being independent, and my parents wouldn't really allow me to go around outside of the country to go perform, etc. So although I was already working towards being a performer, performing wasn't possible. And I also, very young, I was doing Diabolo, and I really loved editing tutorials and making videos about my new trick with Diabolo. And it was really good for me to have this creative process around breaking down stuff, like what I learned, and then to teach it to other people really young. I always loved that. And so it made sense to start sharing it. So at first I was just doing it for free because I was 14 and I was like, yeah, I don't need money, I'm living at my parents. But then very quickly, when I wanted to go out and not be dependent of my parents anymore, I was like, okay, I need to make money. Can't really perform yet because I'm studying. So yeah, using that platform, Patreon, was a really nice opportunity to put my tutorials and my classes out there and get an income out of it.
And what is it like having this kind of like direct relationship with your audience? How do you go around creating content?
Yeah, so most of my creative process goes towards having. I'm mostly using Instagram as like my main window of visibility. So it's lots of short videos of like little sequences of tricks, or even one trick sometime, or even short tutorials. Then to lead people to go and see my longer classes on Patreon. I mainly try to find things that correspond to what I like to train, because of course I have a certain level and people that want to learn from me don't necessarily have the same level. So I really like to break down what I love to practice myself into smaller bits that are more accessible, but still give a taste of what is my style of juggling and what I enjoy in my juggling, maybe on another level.
So, Beau, you are a performing artist. You also have a very vibrant Patreon page based on membership, and that is your main source of income.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So this choice that I make of mainly wanting my income coming from teaching and this online work that I do is because technically I love teaching as much as I love performing, and the process that's the creative process that's behind both. The thing is, when it comes to performing and creating juggling, creating an act, etc., I love it so much that I don't want it to be something that I depend on. Because if it becomes something that I'm dependent on, so the creation of an act, let's say, is something that I will need to pay my rent and my food, then it's going to get stressful. And in the end, I'm afraid I will miss the point of what I wanted to do there, which is just something that I love by itself and not that I want to use in a financial goal. That's why I prefer to use the teaching and this Patreon page as my income, because that way I can really focus on that for getting money. And at the same time, when I come to the point where I'm like, okay, I want to create something for the sake of creating something, an act, etc., then it really comes from an authentic me wanting to do it and not me needing to do it. So yeah, I think that's mainly the why of that.
Okay. And what do you need to do, or what do you do in order to have a successful Patreon page that would cover your rent and allow you to be able to create?
So that's an interesting question.
On your own terms.
Yeah, very interesting question. You need patience, a lot of patience. Because now I'm getting to the point after 1 year of working hard on it that I'm starting to be able to pay for rent and food. It's starting to get sustainable, but it took 1 full year to get there. I guess it's mainly, you don't need to be a professional videographer. You don't need to be a professional teacher at all. I was not teaching juggling much before I started that. You just need to be authentic and be consistent on showing stuff, and be also able to just keep improving in whatever you do. Even if your editing skills are really bad, as long as you're improving, people that are following you, they are seeing it, and therefore it helps them to see that you're an interesting person to follow. Because the progression is way more important than what you are, in my opinion. So yeah, mainly that's what I would say. It's like it doesn't matter what you do as long as you are offering something that you like and that you care about, and that you're authentic in the process of making it better.
Is it an expensive process to constantly create content and to make it look more and more professional?
It can be, if you want. For me, it doesn't. I'm literally just using a GoPro, and I've been using pretty much the same GoPro for the last 2 years. And apart from that, I invested in a little mic, and that's it. So it could be expensive. I could choose to buy expensive editing softwares, buy expensive formation to learn how to edit better. But in the end, you can keep it simple and focus on what's in there and not the form that much.
And is it very competitive, this content creation game?
It could be. I am mainly teaching a specific prop that is poi juggling and poi spinning, and so it's kind of like a very niche thing, because there is a juggling world that's already a niche thing, and then there is the poi juggling. So for people that will know that, poi is basically a ball with a rope and a handle, so it's like a very floppy liquid club. So yeah, it's such a niche thing that in the end there are very few people that create that content, and it's actually something that's, I think, great for the community that uses this prop, is that there is a real need for educational content around it, because it's not something that you can find that much on the internet. So yeah.
And how do you structure your membership?
Mm-hmm. So the way I structure it, Patreon has this thing where you can just offer different types of membership, so one price or the other. My minimum price, I chose $2 because I wanted it to be accessible. So to have at least 70% of my content that might not be free, it's $2, it's still something, but almost. And then you can still go up $5, $10, $20, $30, $50, and get more exclusive specific content. Or I also offer online Zoom classes, so like one-to-one classes for $10, $20, etc. But yeah, mainly with the $2 pledges, people already get access to hundreds of tutorials and new tutorials every week. Which I found really cool, because then that means that I build up more people. I don't get as much money in the end because it's only $2, but I really like it because then also I don't have to worry about people leaving. I'm not stressed about like, I have to post stuff. If I'm late, 2 people are going to go off of my Patreon, and then I'm going to lose half of my income. If 2 people go, it's $2. The next week I have 2 people coming back. So it's like it's way more accessible for the community in general.
So how did you choose the $2 price? Why not $3?
Was just the minimum that Patreon could offer, like you couldn't go lower. And I didn't really think about it. I just took $2. Yeah.
Well, it's nice that.
And also it's kind of like a point that I can have, like when people are kind of like, oh yeah, but I can't really afford your classes. I'm like, what's cheaper than $2? Anyway.
So you think that by making it so affordable, you've managed to reach a greater number of audience, and then the $2 sort of
I think so, yeah.
Sustains you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Fila. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
My name is Philippe. I'm half French, half Italian. Some people in the scene call me Fila. I've been living in Berlin for 5 years, and I was one of Declan's students at the Etage. I'm primarily a juggler. My main specialty is contact staff, which is a little bit of a odd discipline in circus, I would say, but that's what I do. Apart from that, I also do a lot of mime and physical theater clown. So I have a 1-hour production in which there's maybe about 10 minutes of juggling, and the rest is all storytelling, pantomime, theater, yeah.
And so you bring in lots of different elements together in your shows.
Yeah, I try to. Well, actually, when I was in school with Declan was always telling me, you need to focus on something, because I was always quite interested in a lot of different things, and I always wanted to do this, and this. So it was really important for me to narrow down my area of focus, but at the same time, I always wanted to allow myself the opportunity to explore all the things that I found interesting. So yeah, there is a lot of different elements. There's different elements of juggling, but there's also a lot of dance, a lot of comedy. There's some acrobatics in there. But in the end, it's all dramaturgy and storytelling, I would say, is the main element. Yeah.
So how do you go about doing research for a show like that?
So for the Lulu show specifically, it's a 1 hour show, and I'm on the stage the whole time, and essentially it's started off with a few different separate numbers that I had developed during my school years, which I really enjoyed, and I tried to weave a storyline through these shows, which in retrospect is really not the best way to construct a 1 hour long number. And there were really times where I was like, how am I ever going to make this striptease number fit in a mime show? But I think if you think about it enough, you can always find a way to weave your story in naturally, but you really have to be true to the story. I think if I were to do another 1 hour show, I wouldn't start that way. I would start with, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to say? And then build the scenes on top of that, instead of the other way around.
And how do you develop details? So let's say you started out with an idea, and in your research, how do you develop details, both in terms of character work, because there's Lulu, and also in terms of the potential of different disciplines in terms of how they can drive the story forward?
The details, in a sense, they come by themselves. And in another sense, sometimes I really make an effort to have a specific moment there or a specific scene there, because I find it important. So for example, with Lulu, the 1 hour piece, it's all pantomime, right? So I have to explain everything by gestures, and the public then interprets it. And it starts off quite easy and simple, and then it gets quite complicated. But after a while, the public really follows it, so they learn this language that I'm speaking, so to say. And so then I do include some very precise details, which while I was writing the piece, I thought, is anybody even going to realize this? Is it going to be obvious, or is it necessary at all? And my answer to that would be that in some cases, there are some things that are absolutely necessary for the public to understand. Everything else, it's sort of embellishment, and some people will understand it and some people won't. Maybe some people will understand it the second time they see it, some people won't understand it at all. But I think as an artist, for me, it's really important to go as deep in the detail as possible.
So which details, and it can be anything from lighting to and if you're doing mime, details related to those techniques, which details are very important to you that perhaps maybe earlier on you neglected and then realized that this is a very important part of putting a show together and effectively communicating its purpose and intent to an audience?
With the Lulu show, it's all pantomime based, so the storyline is explained with this language of mime. So there are some details that are extremely important, because otherwise the image or what I'm trying to say doesn't come across. For example, there's a part in the scene where the main character, he has to throw up, so he goes into the bathroom, into the toilet, and he lifts the toilet seat like this, and then he starts puking. The first times I tried that bit in front of a public, I I would do this movement, the symbol of lifting the toilet seat up. And if I just stop my hands there, some people of the public, when I let go, they would see the toilet seat falling back down on my head while I was puking. And for me, this is something that I never thought of before, and it's simply fixed just by doing this with the hands, which from here to there, it seems like an insignificant detail, but in this world of pantomime where this small difference in the gesture changes the story completely, these are super important things. Sometimes it's something I know I have to do, and sometimes it's just trial and error. Sometimes I'll have a very clear idea of what I want to show in my mind, and then I will do the gestures in mime, and I'll ask somebody, hey, did you see what I wanted to say, or what is this for you? And based on that, I will know how to fix and refine and adjust what I'm trying to say.
Fascinating, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nika Storey, stage name Fifi Phantom, and I'm a burlesque and circus artist. And I like to work with my body and use it as a tool to express kind of queer culture and the abnormal and the extremes. Yes.
You worked your way through circus school. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you balance the artistic life with your personal life?
Mm-hmm. I was going to circus school full time and then also working and performing on weekends, which was magical, but also a struggle. And just having kind of no free time for myself, really. But also I really value social situations in terms of like training or performing and kind of having that, but it's also a bit confusing because I have this kind of like alter ego that is part of me, that is Fifi Phantom, that is a part of me and who I am, but it's also kind of like this other person that is being put on this like upper like stage or kind of experience, and then I have Nika who I am at home, and it's hard to find the balance between those two and like figure out how to have both me and this like character that I also put on for people in a way that is like my performance. And if you're performing all the time, it's like you kind of blur the point between what is you and what is the stage you, and how do you like find this line between those two, and how do you have both without losing parts of either.
Many artists struggle with mental health issues. Mm-hmm. It can be quite a barrier to one's creative potential. You've dealt with similar issues. How do you cope with it? Do you have any advice for other artists who perhaps may be going through similar experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely struggle with a lot of mental health issues. I've gotten into I would say 3 quite severe depressions in my life. One during the pandemic. And art for me is also an outlet to get out of those spaces and to kind of feel my emotions and feel what's going on inside of me that I can't really express in words, especially in these bouts of depression. It's really hard for me to express myself with words or talking or even want to talk to people, but to go into even a space and be able to dance or train or do circus and kind of have this outlet of expression that can somehow pull me out of this hole while at the same time expressing what got me there, if that makes sense. I find it really valuable. And then I think also seeking help outside of just pouring everything into your art is also really healthy. I recently got a therapist and she's fucking awesome. So that's great. I think it helps to be able to talk to someone outside of your friends and sphere, and also have a point of contact outside of your art too, because I think a lot of artists pour so much of their mental health trauma and things into their art, which is amazing and creates beautiful art. I think some of the best art I've created is from these bouts of depression, which is both cliche and beautiful. But I think it's also valuable to have other outlets to express yourself, because I think also a lot of artists come into this trap where they think, oh, if I'm not depressed or I don't have these mental health traumas, I'm going to make terrible art and everything I do is bad. And that's also a trap that I don't think is valuable or good. I mean, you shouldn't destroy your own mental health for your art. And I think they kind of coincide. People that are artists often struggle with mental health. I think there is this duality that coincides with it, but I also think it means that you don't have to be, I don't know, in the like worst like bottom of your life to create good art. I think you can also like reflect back from your past traumas and create from that, or not, also create from maybe happiness or other aspects. But I think it's important to have both like an artistic outlet and something that is like counseling or therapy or whatever works for people, but just to have something that it's not just your art that you're pouring everything into, because that can also mess with your mental health. And if you perform something and then, I don't know, it doesn't go well or the audience doesn't receive it well, you're gonna like be very destructive to yourself. But if you have like an outlet outside of just performing, I think or art, I think it helps to also deal with mental health. It's helping me a lot. Yay, therapy.
Great. So a lot of people have certain perceptions about what an artist's life entails. And this can be based on seeing people on stage, seeing people expressing themselves, seeing people sort of in an empowered state of mind. But there's a flip side to it as well. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that people have this idea of artists that is, very glamorous and glamorized and thought of as kind of this, that you're almost put on a pedestal, as seen as like subhuman or not human, or this like other entity that is, you have these stage lights and these costumes and the tricks you're doing or whatever type of performance that you're doing, you're kind of put as this other of like almost subhuman or something else.
Extra human.
Yeah, extra human, like even more incredible somehow, which is amazing. But then also, I don't know, there is this undertone where people don't really see everything that goes into that. And as an artist, I kind of enjoy this duality of having these like, I don't know, like hyper glamorized, like really high pedestal positions, and then also being like really low in the fact that I don't make very much money. I'm like, in subsidized housing. I like have to work really, really hard to be working as a full-time artist. Before I was a full-time artist, I had like 4 other jobs that I was doing and all these things, and how much you work, and also that you don't really have this like stop, and my brain also can't really stop. Like I'm just like, oh, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and then I have to sew this costume, and now I have to make this act, and I have to send these emails and do this thing. And it's like, you're kind of constantly working, which in some ways is amazing, the training and creating process, very fun, but doing all this like emailing and all the like work that is really not entertaining as an artist, and also like networking and making sure you have all these like contacts and people to be with and ways to get jobs is also a struggle. And I think people don't see so much like how artists struggle, and also the pain that they put themselves through to create, like we talked about this mental health and how that also comes into play. And I think there is, I don't know, this just duality of being thought of as like extra human and beautiful and like all these amazing things, and then you kind of have this like underbelly that isn't really discussed or talked about or thought of, and people don't really see like that side of being an artist and how it can be such a struggle.
And if a lot of people come to see you as your on-stage persona, it could feel lonely when you're not on stage, and you might start disassociating yourself from the character and so on. How do you cope with that? What can artists do in order to alleviate some of that loneliness?
I don't think I have the answer to that one. I definitely struggle with that. I kind of like disassociate between like my artist self and my kind of like home self, and I struggle sometimes. Like, I don't know, I have friends that only call me Fifi or Nika, and it's also confusing. And then they meet each other and they're like, you're Nika, are you Fifi, what's happening? And it's kind of confusing. And also I don't know, sometimes when I'm in social environments where I'm not performing or I'm not Fifi and I'm Nika, I kind of like don't know what to do with myself. And then I like start falling into this like, oh, I'm performing for everyone. Like I'm here to entertain you, and like this is what I need to do, which like is very fun for me. I enjoy it a lot, but it's also like this kind of line blur of like where my identity is, like what part of it is me. Am I like disassociated into this other reality, or is this like actually who I am? Which, I mean, Fifi is part of Nika and they're intertwined, but it's like, how do you find this balance? And like, at what point am I performing or being who I am? And sure, those are both connected, but it's confusing, so I don't have the answer.
That was a good answer though. As you say, a lot of artists have to deal with juggling multiple identities. Is queerness and the element of that in your performances on stage, is that a way of processing these fractured identities?
Yeah, definitely. I think growing up and being very queer but not really understanding what that identity was and being very ostracized. I grew up in a quite conservative town in Canada. And I was always kind of like the freak or the weirdo and seen as like very much the other and like bullied a lot as a kid. And only when I like came into queer culture and my own queerness did I kind of like identify with this and finally like come into this weirdness of like really embracing it. Like before I kind of did a bit, but then like once I found this like queer community and having this like queer aspect to my identity, I really started like embracing the weird and like embracing who I was and not shying away from it or trying to cover up the inner freak inside of me. And I think the queer community has given so much for me, especially in Berlin. There really is this like very community giving space that like people are really there for each other. In the pandemic, we were raising money for people that weren't getting like government aid or like all these different things. There really is this kind of like family environment that I've really connected to here that I really love. And also, even though I'm part of like many different performance scenes, like the circus scene or the burlesque scene, or even the dance scene, I feel the most like home in the queer performance scene, just because it's very giving in what you do and lets you kind of like really explore the boundaries of your identity and not worry that you have to fit into this box, which as much as I love circus or burlesque or even dance, sometimes I feel like I have to be this or that or do what everyone in the contemporary circus scene is doing because it looks similar and what I'm doing looks very different. And so it's a bit like confusing to be a part of many different scenes. Also beautiful. I like having like this, again, fractured identity of like getting to pop into these different scenes and kind of explore all of them in my own way. But for a long time, I really struggled with like not feeling like I fit into any of them. And then with the queer performance scene, I really felt like, okay, this is my home because I don't have to be anything or do anything or fit in anywhere. I can just like be who I am and embrace my own identity and my own queerness, and whatever that looks like is okay here. And it's like a space that I really value and I'm very grateful for in Berlin.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, why not? Hi, I'm
Hello.
Sara, and I do circus. I perform mainly as a street performer in street show festivals all around Europe. And my main disciplines are city wheel and hula hoop, and I'm also learning tap dancing. This is my new passion.
Tell me, what do you find more interesting about street performances compared to the conventional stage?
Street performance, because it's out on the streets, so anything can happen. So the audience is much more participating also in the performances, and it's always open for everybody. To the theater, you have to pay a ticket. There's an entrance, but on the street, anybody can come and see the show. So it's more available, I would say.
This element of randomness and chaos in street performances, how does that shape your creative process? What do you like about that?
When in the street performances, you have to be more open for improvisation. Anything can happen. It can be weather, or it can be people appearing in your show without invitation, and you have to be prepared to deal with these kind of situations. So I would say maybe this is the biggest factor or the difference.
And do you enjoy that because then every show is different, because there's always an element of randomness?
Yeah, it's exciting.
Nice.
Yeah.
You have a repertoire of some amazing characters that you tour with, including the infamous Granny. How do you go about creating characters?
Sometimes it's a different show that I'm part of. that requires or allows me to try something new. And I might have like a little seed of idea that I would like to try something. Sometimes it can be just that I find a costume and it gives me an idea, and I start to create characters like that.
So you put on a costume and then you think, well, what kind of person would feel comfortable in this costume? What kind of personality would fit this costume?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. And how do you know a character is fully developed? Is it ever fully developed?
I don't think they are really fully developed.
But
there's
at
always
what
something.
point do you decide, well, okay, now it's ready for the stage at least?
Yeah. Probably when I feel really comfortable in the costume playing this role, even if it's kind of still raw and new, but I feel like I can play within this character.
And what does that comfort feel like? Is it something random happens and you know how to adapt to the situation, or what do you mean by comfortable?
Yeah, that's hard to explain. It's just something for me personal that I feel like kind of like myself within this character. Yeah.
Okay, and so if every character is incomplete, how much time do you spend with each character?
Like developing the character. Like the granny, for example. I would say maybe like the first few years it was developing. I wasn't really like working on the character outside of performing, but mainly while performing. So it kind of just like build up and new things, a lot from the improvisation that I've done while performing. I find out this granny can do this also, or she acts like that, and yeah.
So street performances and street theater works very well for character development, you would say? Yeah,
I think so, because you have the interaction with the public, or it's much easier to interact with the public.
And is that something you would recommend to other artists?
Yeah, especially if you want to do character work. I think it's a good way to build up and find out how this character acts and lives.
So, apart from street performances and street theater, what other exercises or methods do you use to shape the character or to develop it?
So you can use different kind of theater exercises. Very simple ones is to like find a voice, for example, how this character would speak. If the character, what is the physicality of the character? Does the character stand up, or is it more hunched? What is the way of walking of this character? And simple theatrical exercises, also like situations of how would this character go to a shop and buy food or something like this. Yeah.
Are any of these characters do you draw upon personal experiences, people in your life, maybe somebody's grandmother, etc., for the granny character? How much do you draw characteristics and traits from the personalities in your surroundings, in your environment?
Yeah, this also inspires, people around you, or also like seeing other performances. When you see an interesting character of someone else, you can always take inspiration. I take a lot of inspiration, like from what I've seen and from the people around me also.
You mentioned costumes earlier and how they're a source of inspiration. and how putting on a costume can demand a personality, so you start creating a character out of that. How do you go about looking for costumes? Do you just chance upon them? Do you discover them in a flea market, in a vintage store? Where do you find your costumes?
A lot in secondhand shops, yeah. And sometimes by chance, or sometimes I also just have like an idea of how I would a certain character look like, and then I go with this vision to look. But a lot is also just by chance. I see something cool and I take it. I still don't know what to use it for, but yeah.
Do you have one of these costumes for which you have not developed a character yet, but it's there in your closet?
Yeah.
What is the costume?
I found from a flea market like a 80s dress, kind of like a really over the top glitter and black glitter and gold and like a really fluffy dress part. And this was like, this could be cool to use for something, but I haven't yet done it. Yeah.
It's interesting because you're also imagining the history of the dress. So if you find it in a vintage shop, somebody wore that at some point. Mm-hmm. Somebody seriously wore the full glittery gown, etc.
Yeah.
So do you then think of this history of this person who once owned this dress?
Yeah, maybe in some level. Yeah, or at least like when I see something and it kind of it starts to inspire me. Just seeing this dress or this costume, and I start to get ideas. So that's usually a good sign. Yeah.
So, Sara, how would one of your characters do this interview? Let's say the granny, the infamous granny. How would the granny inhabit a space like this, or a situation like this?
Mm-hmm. So, would you like me to speak like the granny?
Yes, why not?
Okay.
Welcome, granny.
Ask me something, young boy.
Granny, how did you go about choosing your victims in a street performance setting?
I choose the most handsome boys to talk to.
I see. And do you feel comfortable doing this interview with us?
Oh yes, very much. There's many cameras around here, like this one, for example.
Hello,
husband. Hello.
You shouldn't look into the camera.
I shouldn't look into the camera.
No.
In this one.
Also that
and
one.
And also that one.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because it looks unnatural, Granny.
Really?
Yeah.
Do I look unnatural? Do I look unnatural to you?
No, Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the event. Please stay tuned for further information on how to pre-order the book. We hope to see you at Katapult soon. Goodbye.